yesterday, who I'll tell you more about in a couple of slides' time. We are still recruiting for several UX managers. Once we have the new management structure in place, I hope to step back and continue with my focus on UX research. I'm happy to take any questions today about UX design or UX research. Eric is also on the call to answer any questions you may have about changes within the UX department. So this is the new structure for the UX department. As mentioned earlier, we've extended an offer to a UX director candidate yesterday. She started her career as a technical recruiter, so she can hire, and she's offered to interview UX manager candidates in the pipeline before her start date and will make final hiring decisions. So many thanks to Steve in recruiting for another great candidate. So we have ambitious growth plans for the UX department in 2019. We want to grow to 42 people, which is 180% growth. So that's 27 new hires, which equates to 5 managerial roles and 22 ICs. Obviously, this is still pending approval by the board on January 31st. So we're prioritising managerial hires first, so we're taking a top-down approach. However, to avoid missing out on good candidates and to ensure we hit the headcount targets, we're still looking for ICs. So if you know of any suitable candidates for either the managerial or IC roles, then please do encourage them to apply. So the UX department is aiming to work more upstream in 2019. We want to work more closely with product managers in order to have greater input into prioritization decisions. A way in which we can do this is to produce low fidelity artifacts to support our ideas. We find that discussions about features are usually more productive when there is a visual to refer to. We can produce low fidelity visuals reasonably quickly. They provide everyone with a shared understanding about what we're trying to achieve, which helps us to collaborate more effectively and iterate more quickly. We're already starting to make good progress towards working in this way by adopting tools like Balsamiq, but the available capacity within the department means that we haven't always been able to be as generative as we would like to be. The additional headcount plan for the department will really help us drive this forwards. However, we're under no illusions. We know that not every design will be prioritised and turned into a feature, but we believe this is a good way for us to articulate our own ideas and about how GitLab could be improved as a product. We're also aiming to upskill existing designers and hire new designers within the department that have coding skills. We believe this will help us have greater empathy for the users we are designing for, and it means we are less reliant on front-end engineers for initiatives such as the design system. As mentioned earlier, when we have the new management structure in place, I hope to step back and continue with my focus on UX research. So we're planning to recruit 4 full-time UX researchers a little later on in 2019. And there's 2 things that I'm especially excited about. So the first is research shops. So this will be a focus for the UX research manager. So the goal is to operationalize UX research in order to reduce inefficiencies and to make UX research scalable by repeated processes with reliable timescales, ready to apply methods and templates. And this is something that has already started happening. I anticipated that the UX research team will start to grow rapidly because we have a very high demand for research. And it's very important that UX researchers are not bogged down with inadequate tooling and processes. They need to be left to focus on their craft so that they can produce research which is valuable to GitLab. And closely related to this is open sourcing UX research. So not only do we want to make research insights more accessible for everybody across GitLab to find and integrate into their work, we also want to collaborate with you. We know that there's people across the organization that are conducting research in one form or another, whether that's a survey or analysing Zendesk tickets. And we want to share our processes with you. We want to encourage more cross-functional research participation and knowledge sharing when it comes to understanding our users and customers. And there's an additional layer to this. So I'm probably contacted a couple of times a month from UX researchers or people getting started with research who want guidance about how we undertake research at GitLab. They want to know what tools we're using and what processes we've got in place so that they can do a similar thing within their own organizations. And I'd love to be able to easily refer them to that information. So that's all my slides for today. I'm now going to stop sharing my screen and I'd be happy to take any questions. Tumbleweed.
You're the interim UX director, if I'm correct, right? Will we still get those fun UX research group conversations?
Not at the moment. I've just taken over the UX department one, and I will be giving a little bit of research updates during them. But hopefully when we've got a director, they'll take over the UX department conversations, and I'll restart my research one. So I hope you'll come back to them and take part in them and hopefully win a prize.
Something has to give, right? Well, big thanks to Sarah O'Donnell for stepping up in this time of transition and helping out the team. It's a great service to the company. She's done a great job. And it'll be another month. I think the start date for this director will be mid-February. So she'll continue to work on that for about a month and then continue to focus on UX research. So thanks again, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Hey, Eric, sorry I'm joining late, so apologies if this was already answered. I'm looking at the structure on slide 3, and I noticed it's UX director and then dev manager, sec manager, so on and so forth. And if I'm not mistaken, if you look at sort of the non-UX engineering side of the house, there's analogous structure, but it's maybe senior director and then director. So it seems a little bit off. Is that on purpose? Was there any intentional thinking about, say, using the manager title versus like a director title when hiring for these roles?
Yeah, that's a good question, Victor. And so symmetry is important, but not perfect symmetry, right? So like level is really about the person's role and their experience and whatnot. But nevertheless, we definitely want to have this symmetry with dev, sec, ops, and enablement, because that is the structure of our product. And this applies not just to departments in engineering, but also product management, right? So we've got Kenny and Eric Brinkman, who are ops and dev respectively. I could easily see hiring a senior sec leader to do the same. Enablement, maybe we'll get rolled up in one of those for now. Eventually, maybe it could become its own directorship on the PM side. Who knows? That's up to Mark and Sid. But we're reflecting this as best we can in UX and about on the same scale in quality. So you're going to see test automation managers for each one of these areas managing their teams. But then you got development, which you call out, is kind of like an order of magnitude larger. And so that's where, it dictates like a single interface. That's what Christopher will be doing when he joins next week. And then we'll have directors as opposed to managers there, managing constellations of teams as opposed to a flat team of ICs. So whereas in UX and quality, you'll have, in each one of these teams, if people are looking at the slide, you'll see, Tori Davis will be, I think staff designer, comma configure. That's a specialty and is a stable counterpart to that configure group. In development being larger, it won't be one person, it'll be an entire team. You'll have a back-end and a front-end team, probably mapping to configure, and every one of those people, including the manager, would have that specialty. So different scales, but the important part is reflecting the product and having those stable counterparts defined so everybody knows what feature set they're dedicated to, not forever, but for reasonable time span, which is like months to years. Of course, we have the flexibility to move people around based on need, based on candidate interests, but people should feel like they know who they're working with for substantial time spans.
That makes sense. So a couple of questions come to mind. So maybe from like, so I think from what you said, like from the scale from like the people writing code perspective, there's more people. So maybe there's another layer of indirection. And then does that mean that we use the title director and maybe hire for a certain set of skills because they're managing more people down the line? And so that's the thinking there. For me, it doesn't really matter because, I look at an org chart and maybe I can figure it out, but maybe I'm interested in more from like a hiring perspective, what type of experience you're looking perspective. When you see the word director versus manager, you're like, oh, what does that mean? And so it just caught my eye when I saw that.
Yeah, when you just generically what a director is at a technology company, what immediately jumps to mind is managing multiple projects and managing managers, and then skip level managing ICs. And it's a non-trivial jump. Having been through it myself, I was a director at 3 different companies, and it's different to manage managers versus ICs for sure. It's easier in some ways and harder in others. But that's one of the big differences. And then, so this is one of those areas where it's a multivariate equation. Different parameters dictate different answers. And in this case, it's really like the head count sort of overrides the peer relationship of like, oh, we need a director here, even if they're peers or stable counterparts in other areas. Might be a product manager with no direct reports, or might be an engineering manager that's managing a flat team. That's okay. People shouldn't feel like they need to have the same title to collaborate with someone. But we need certain skills and experience and background at different levels to be effective at the job.
Thank you.
If possible, can you reiterate a little bit on the enablement group? What will their goals be and responsibilities?
Yeah, actually, let me link to our product categories page because it's explained in depth there, at least it's starting to be explained in depth there. It's a relatively new concept, but the background is, we used to say in 2018, GitLab, or I used to say 2018, GitLab reflects the DevOps lifecycle. And then we added secure or sec to that. And so we say GitLab reflects the DevSecOps lifecycle. But there's always and forever been these teams that don't quite map to that kind of like user-facing feature prominent category method of organizing these things, like Gitly and Geo, right? These are things that are very important. They need to work extremely well, but they're not quite a stage in our customers developing their software, right? And so we decided rather than continue to just bundle these things up in dev or randomly attach them to ops, we've got enough of them now to actually pull them out into their own thing. So think of enablement as like, the platform upon which we build these pillars. And that's what's going into the enablement department. Another example is like we had an idea to create this team we called Sync. Product recently revamped that name to Fulfillment, which has more to do with e-commerce and making sure that billing and licensing and these things work. And fulfillment will be one of those things that is enablement for everything else that we and our customers want to do. So let me dig up that link, and there's more depth on this page.
Would you say that GitLab UI and design.gitlab.com we're now mostly managed by the design team, and the front-end team would fall under that category?
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand. You're saying the design and content of GitLab.com?
Yeah, so I'm referring to GitLab UI, which builds the front-end UI components for GitLab who are used throughout the product. And design.gitlab.com, which is the gateway to be able to contribute to GitLab itself, which are in essence enabling everyone to contribute to GitLab, right? If they're going to fall under that category and get their own product managers, their own dedicated teams, etc.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thanks for posing that. And I think the answer is it depends. But I'll give you more than just it depends. So things like Geo are clearly a team, and it's large enough where it needs a manager and it needs a product manager and gets a lot of attention. There's other things like you mentioned GitLab UI where it may graduate to that point, but until it does, we wouldn't necessarily form a team around it. We would say, well, let's make this part of the responsibilities of the best suited team. So GitLab UI, because the dev sub-department in the development department and engineering, which will be led by Tim, because he's got the most front-end facing teams and the most front-end focused individuals, we may just say, okay, well, that's going to land on the responsibility of one of his teams. But if it grows and we've got 8 people working on it essentially full-time, we might say, okay, we're at the tipping point. Let's create an actual team around something like this. And so things will fluctuate between being an aspect of a team and a manager's responsibility versus being a dedicated team. And then there's also things that are going to, that wouldn't be either, that are so broad that they cross-cut the whole application. We really need every team focused on this topic for their area of the code base, always and forever. That's possible as well. So like writing tests, right? We wouldn't have a team that says, this team is going to write everybody's unit test. We say, no, this is something that every team needs to do. And we sprinkle that throughout the organization. Sort of a counterexample. And I posted the link to the product categories page. I was going to send the deep link, but it looks like Kenny already put it in there. Thanks, Kenny. Any other questions for Sarah and myself, or should we do a countdown? No? All right, Sarah, do you want to do the sign off?
Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a great weekend. Bye.